I put this shit on Jay Prince. I put this shit on Senior. My little nigga from Mississippi smacked the fuck out of Junior. Oh my grandma. Listen, you got that chain on, somebody smacking me. When I wouldn't shank him. I add a shank on this bitch. Junior came with that drunk shit like all that. Whoa! Oh my grandma, boy, we don't even play like that. Shit, I don't never do that. Get what Junior said? Nigga flew to the door. That nigga flew to the other side of the door on my grandma's grave. Flew. Nigga, what the? I like that little nigga right there.
Jay Prince Jr. was moving through Houston with the kind of confidence that suggested he believed the city belonged to him. The attitude mirrored his father's legacy, and he carried it openly, as if reputation alone made him untouchable. That image held strong for years, till it didn't, because at one point, one of Rap-A-Lot's own artists reportedly caught him in a vulnerable position and nearly ended everything over a contract dispute that had been building behind the scenes. The situation wasn't random. It wasn't sudden. It was the result of pressure that had been stacking quietly for a long time. What followed would become one of the most talked about street justice stories in hip-hop. Not because it was loud, but because it exposed dynamics people had whispered about for years. Before that viral footage ever surfaced, the groundwork had already been laid. To understand how it reached that level, you have to understand Rap-A-Lot Records and how the operation is structured. The label was founded by Jay Prince Sr., and for decades, it carried weight. Artists like Scarface and the Ghetto Boys helped establish Houston as a force in hip-hop at a time when the South was overlooked. Rap-A-Lot wasn't just a label, it was a symbol of power and protection. That reputation shaped the city's music culture. But over time, something shifted. Today, many Houston artists choose not to sign with them. That detail alone raises questions. A label that once defined the region now struggles to attract the new generation. There's a reason for that, and it isn't accidental. The structure of Rap-A-Lot deals has long been criticized in private conversations. Artists sign when they're vulnerable, when they're facing legal trouble, when money is tight, when an advance feels like survival. The promises are familiar. Security, promotion, connections, exposure. But what's often discussed afterward is the revenue split. Reports from the streets claim contracts that leave artists with a fraction of what they generate. The numbers people repeat are severe. Up to 90% of music revenue reportedly flowing back to the label. That kind of split changes everything. The artist takes the risk. The artist creates the music. The artist faces the consequences, yet most of the income allegedly goes elsewhere. And the control doesn't stop at music sales, distribution channels, YouTube revenue, streaming royalties, third-party collection through companies like Create Music Group, layers that make it difficult for artists to see what they truly earn. Meanwhile, the label maintains control of the infrastructure. For years, this was common knowledge in certain circles. That's why many Houston rappers now stay independent. They'd rather keep their masters, own their distribution, and accept slower growth than surrender long-term ownership. The city watched too many artists sign deals that looked powerful on the surface, but limited them behind closed doors. Independence became the safer route. It's not because it's easy, but because it offers control. And then there's Honeycomb Brazy. His situation brings the tension into focus. Born Nashon Jones in Mobile, Alabama, Honeycomb didn't come from comfort. His upbringing was marked by instability. His father is serving a life sentence. His mother struggled in the Happy Hills projects. In 2021, his grandparents were killed when their home was burned down, an act many believed was tied to ongoing street conflicts surrounding Brazy.
Working as a bodyguard for a Mobile rapper known as Honeycomb Brazy, pleading guilty today to a federal gun charge. Miguel Hall pleading to being a felon, convicted in possession of a firearm. That charge stems from a traffic stop from a Mobile County Sheriff deputy on I-65 in December. Hall admitted he was not allowed to have a gun because of 4 prior felony convictions in Texas. Officers found an AR pistol near where he...
Loss wasn't theoretical for him. It was personal, immediate, permanent. When someone from that background signs a contract that limits their earnings, the stakes are different. The pressure is heavier, because for artists like that, music isn't just expression, it's escape. And when escape feels restricted, frustration builds in ways that don't always stay contained. Brazy was trying to find a way out. That part gets overlooked when people reduce his story to headlines. Mobile, Alabama, is not a place where opportunities fall into your lap. It is a city where survival often comes before ambition. Violence is common. Resources are limited. The system rarely offers clean exits. That environment shaped his mentality long before rap deals were even possible. By 2020, he wasn't chasing fame, he was chasing relief. Then the freestyle video went viral. Millions of views. The streets responded immediately. His name started circulating beyond Alabama, and that momentum attracted attention from Houston. When J. Prince Sr. reached out, it wasn't just another industry call. It was a legend extending an offer. For a young artist with family depending on him, with grandparents recently killed, with a father serving life, that kind of opportunity doesn't feel optional. It feels urgent. It feels like destiny knocking at the door. So in the summer of 2020, Honeycomb Brazy signed with Rap-A-Lot Records. They presented him with the Mob Ties chain. It's not a simple piece of jewelry, but a symbol. Heavy gold. A statement that you're part of something bigger. They placed him in videos alongside J. Prince, riding through Houston in a white Rolls-Royce Phantom, the skyline glowing in the background. The imagery was deliberate. Power, protection, legacy. For Brazy, it looked like confirmation that he had finally made it. He believed this was the turning point. He believed he could get his father proper legal representation. He believed he could move his mother out of Alabama and into something safer. He said it clearly. He didn't sign for fame. He didn't sign for clout. He signed to help his family. That was the mission. But once the deal was in place, the promises began to shift. J. Prince reportedly assured him he would have security, that he would be protected, that being mob ties meant no one could touch him. On the surface, it sounded solid, till the details started to unravel. According to accounts from those close to the situation, the security provided to Brazy was not what it appeared to be. Instead of licensed professionals, the label allegedly hired individuals from the streets and placed them around him under the title of security. The arrangement served a purpose, could be written off as a business expense. On paper, it looked legitimate. In reality, it blurred lines between protection and liability. Brazy trusted the structure, believed the label knew what it was doing. He believed he was covered. Then December 2023 happened. He was riding in a Cadillac Escalade near I-65 in Crichton. The so-called security was with him. Police initiated a traffic stop. What happened next changed everything. As officers approached, the men in the vehicle began passing firearms to Brazy, a 9mm pistol, an AR-style pistol. They allegedly handed him the weapons and insisted they were his. The moment unfolded fast. No time for explanation, no time for clarity. Brazy's DNA was reportedly not on those guns, but his fingerprints were not found. He barely knew the individuals riding with him, having only recently connected with them after getting out of prison. But when police discovered the weapons, the charge fell on him, not on the men who brought the firearms, not on the ones who passed them into his hands during the stop. Honeycomb Brazy was arrested and charged. And here's where the tension becomes impossible to ignore. The men labeled as his security were not charged in connection to the weapons. They walked away. Brazy did not. He sat in that vehicle believing he was protected. Instead, he became the one facing the legal consequences. Whether intentional or reckless, the outcome was the same. The protection he was promised did not protect him. Exposed him. Only Brazy caught the case. The so-called security guard he publicly called out is still walking free, moving through the streets as if nothing ever happened. That detail sits heavy, because when the traffic stop ended, the consequences landed on one person. Brazy had options in that moment. Could have told investigators those firearms were not his. Could have explained that the men in the vehicle were hired as security through Rap-A-Lot. He could have shifted the focus. Instead, he stayed silent. He took the charge, pleaded guilty. The decision was not about guilt or innocence in the way people frame it online. It was about survival. Going to trial would have meant exposing who put those men around him. It would have meant pointing directly at the structure that placed him in that position. In his words, he had documentation supporting self-defense claims from previous incidents. The paperwork in black and white showing that someone had kicked in his door and that he had acted to protect himself. But fighting the case would have required unraveling the arrangement behind the so-called security. And in his calculation, that came with its own risks. Risks that do not show up in court transcripts. So he accepted the plea. He absorbed the sentence. While he was incarcerated, those who orchestrated the protection arrangement remained untouched. The contrast was impossible to ignore. One man doing time, others continuing business as usual. That imbalance fueled what came next. From federal prison, Brazy decided he was done protecting the narrative. During a video call, he spoke openly about Rap-A-Lot Records. There was no coded language, no vague insinuations. He addressed the contract directly, according to Brazy. While he was locked up and financially desperate, he was pushed into signing a deal with Create Music Group worth $200,000. At the same time, he claims the label generated roughly $10 million from his music. The disparity in those numbers is what ignited the backlash. 10 million earned, 200,000 paid. A gap too wide to ignore. He described a structure where up to 90% of his revenue was being taken. He spoke about losing control of his YouTube channel, about digital earnings being routed through third-party collectors, about not having direct access to the platforms carrying his own name. In prison, he said he was watching income flow while having no authority over it. He repeatedly demanded control of his channel, stating it was his work, his audience, his revenue. Then he added another layer. Brazy claimed he was the one who introduced Finesse 2 times to Rap-A-Lot, according to him. That move generated significant revenue for the label, reportedly in the range of millions. Yet he says he received nothing in return. No percentage, no finder's fee, no acknowledgement. If accurate, that omission deepened the perception of imbalance. The contrast became even sharper when comparing homecomings. When Brazy was first released from prison, there was no large reception, no public celebration. He walked out quietly and returned to Mobile without the fanfare often associated with major label artists. No cameras waiting, no symbolic gestures. Just a release and a ride home. When Finesse 2 times was released, the presentation looked different. Social media documented a private jet arrival. Mob ties branding, gift exchanges, shopping sprees. Visual confirmation that the label was invested in the moment. The rollout was polished and public. Brazy saw that, and in his mind, the difference was not accidental, it was a signal. You flew him in on a private jet, gave him a watch, took him shopping. When I came home, I got nothing. I'm the one who brought him to y'all. That realization changed everything for Brazy. In that moment, it stopped being about perception and started becoming about pattern. He believed he was watching the same system treat 2 artists differently while profiting heavily from both. One elevated publicly, one left in silence. Yet, according to him, the revenue split remained the same. The imbalance was not emotional. It was structural. From his perspective, it wasn't random favoritism. It was control. Elevate one artist, isolate another. Keep both dependent. That is how leverage works. And for a while, tension between Brazy and Finesse 2 times looked like it might explode into something personal. But in late 2023, something unexpected happened. They connected directly. A FaceTime call. No intermediaries. No label voices in between. And during that conversation, according to Brazy, they began comparing notes. That is where the tone shifted. Finesse reportedly started recognizing the same contract issues, the same revenue discrepancies, same unanswered questions about statements and payouts. When artists begin comparing numbers privately, narratives collapse quickly. Instead of turning their frustration toward each other, they identified what they believed was a shared problem, the label structure itself. Two artists who were close to conflict realized they might have been navigating the same system from different angles. Brazy later stated publicly that he made more money in 1 week with a new independent music connection than he had during his entire time under Rap-A-Lot. That claim hit hard. 1 week versus years, whether symbolic or literal, the point was clear. Ownership changes the math. Independent distribution may generate less gross revenue, but the artist retains a larger percentage. For someone who believed 90% of his earnings had been taken under his contract, that realization was not just financial. It was strategic. By 2024, the situation intensified. Brazy was still attempting to exit his Rap-A-Lot contract. He had reportedly asked repeatedly, publicly and privately. The answer, according to him, remained no. Expressed interest in aligning elsewhere, even mentioning Cash Money as a possible direction, referencing how Drake eventually transitioned after early ties to Rap-A-Lot. But in Brazy's account, he felt restricted. He began describing the contract as holding him hostage. The language escalated because the frustration escalated. He took it to social media, live streams, direct accusations. He framed the dispute as interference with his ability to provide for his family. That narrative resonated because it connected back to why he signed in the first place: helping his father, helping his mother, escaping instability. When he said he was being blocked from feeding his family, it wasn't abstract, it was personal. Then the footage surfaced. According to accounts circulating in Houston and online, Brazy's associate from Mississippi encountered J. Prince Jr. in public. The details moved quickly through social media. The claim was that Jr. was caught without visible security and was physically confronted. Video clips began spreading, short, chaotic, enough to confirm an altercation had taken place. For a figure long associated with untouchable status, the optics alone shifted perception. Brazy addressed it on Instagram Live. He did not distance himself from the narrative. He leaned into it. He described his associate confronting Jr., snapping his fingers as if to suggest how quickly it unfolded. He even referenced family members being aware of it. The tone was celebratory. The message was direct. The alleged trigger, according to Brazy, was J. Prince Jr. reposting a freestyle from another rapper that contained indirect shots at him. In Brazy's view, that repost signaled endorsement. Public alignment with someone throwing shade while he was still contractually tied to the label. In a situation already strained by legal issues and financial disputes, that act was interpreted as disrespect. Cause and effect. Public tension. Contract frustration. Social media escalation. Then physical confrontation. None of it appeared spontaneous when laid out in sequence. It looked like pressure finally finding a release point. J. Prince Jr. attempted to manage the narrative afterward. On social media, he posted messages suggesting there was no hatred toward Brazy. He spoke about prayer, about keeping things respectful, about not escalating the situation. It was the language of someone trying to stabilize perception. But once an incident like that circulates publicly, the tone doesn't erase the event. The footage had already spread. The story had already moved through the city. And in environments like that, reputations are shaped less by captions and more by moments. The contrast between their backgrounds only intensified the conversation. J. Prince Jr. grew up inside an established empire. His father's name carried influence across Houston and beyond. He was raised around security, infrastructure, and protection. Brazy's upbringing was different. Happy Hills projects. It's real instability, real violence. Grandparents lost to a house fire tied to street conflict. A father serving life. Survival was not theoretical for him, it was daily. Two men connected by a contract but formed by completely different environments. When financial disputes mix with public disrespect, pressure builds quickly. Brazy believed his contract restricted him while others prospered from his work. He believed reposts and subtle online gestures signaled alignment against him. When that tension meets the streets instead of a boardroom, the outcome rarely looks controlled. According to circulating accounts, J. Prince Jr. was encountered without visible security. The confrontation that followed became symbolic. Not because of who won, but because of what it represented. An image of invulnerability challenged in public. Afterward, Brazy's celebratory posts about the incident reportedly disappeared from Instagram. The removal fueled speculation. Many assumed calls were made, influence exercised, content erased. That kind of power may quiet a timeline, but it doesn't erase memory. In fact, it often amplifies curiosity. When posts vanish, people assume there is something worth hiding. But stepping back, this situation is larger than one altercation. It reflects a long-standing tension between artists and labels. Brazy argues he remained loyal. He did not shift blame during his gun case, accepted a plea instead of exposing the arrangement behind his security. In return, he says, he remained locked into a contract he viewed as unfair. That perception is what ignited his public stance. The music industry has a documented history of aggressive contracts. It's from early Motown structures to death row and Cash Money's formative years. Disputes over ownership and percentages are not new. What has changed is the visibility. Social media allows artists to speak immediately.
They no longer have to wait decades to tell their side.
Allegations surface in real time, revenue disputes become public debates. When formal negotiations stall and legal pathways feel inaccessible, frustration moves elsewhere. That doesn't justify violence. It explains escalation. Brazy framed his situation as being blocked from feeding his family. When someone believes their livelihood is restricted while others profit, emotions rise, cause and effect. Pressure creates reaction. The most striking element is how avoidable it appears in hindsight. Reasonable contracts, transparent accounting, consistent support. Those adjustments could have altered the trajectory. Instead, distrust expanded until it reached the streets. And once conflict reaches that level, it stops being about numbers on paper. It becomes about respect. From Brazy's perspective, the situation escalated because of greed. He believed the label wanted 90% of everything. He believed they wanted control over revenue, image, distribution, even the direction of his career. And when control becomes excessive, it eventually creates resistance. If the split had been reasonable, if support had been visible while he was incarcerated, if representatives had shown up publicly during court proceedings, if the contract had been renegotiated when he requested release, the tension may never have reached the streets. The confrontation involving J. Prince Jr. would not have carried the same weight. The label's image might have remained untouched. Instead, according to Brazy's narrative, the decision was made to maximize leverage rather than resolve conflict. Honeycomb Brazy ultimately received a sentence of 2.5 years related to the gun charge. The same charge tied to the traffic stop involving weapons he insists were not his. After serving his time, he is now out. The question surrounding his contract remains unresolved publicly. Will Rap-A-Lot release him? Will negotiations reopen? Will the tension continue to build behind closed doors? That part is still unfolding. What is clear is that Brazy has not softened his stance. He has publicly stated he is standing firmly on his position. The dispute did not quiet him. It amplified him. Beyond the individuals involved, this case exposed broader industry realities. Older labels often operate using structures designed decades ago when artists had limited access to information. Long-term ownership clauses, heavy revenue splits, strict control over masters and distribution. But the landscape has changed. Today's artists can research contract terms online. They can build independent platforms. They can distribute music globally without traditional gatekeepers. Examples like Russ, Tech N9, Nee, and Macklemore demonstrate that independence can generate sustainable success. The power dynamic is shifting, slowly but visibly. For labels that continue operating as if the digital era never happened, friction becomes inevitable. Artists now compare statements. They track streaming revenue in real time. They question third-party collectors. Transparency is no longer optional. It's expected. When that transparency is absent, suspicion fills the gap. The lesson for emerging artists is not complicated.
Read every contract carefully. Involve qualified legal representation. Avoid signing agreements under pressure or desperation. Predict damages before you understand promises.
Because once ink meets paper, reversing leverage becomes difficult. Brazy signed believing he was securing a path out for his family. Instead, he found himself entangled in legal battles and financial disputes that extended far beyond music. For J. Prince Jr., the incident delivered a separate message. Reputation inherited through family carries weight, but it does not replace personal conduct. Influence can shape perception, but it cannot erase confrontation once it occurs. Respect in the streets is earned individually. It is reinforced by actions, not lineage. This situation serves as a reminder that unresolved contracts do not remain quiet forever. When artists feel restricted while others profit, pressure builds. When pressure builds without resolution, consequences follow. The Honeycomb Brazy dispute may continue to evolve, but its impact is already visible. It forced conversations about ownership, leverage, and loyalty into the open. If you value deep, documented breakdowns of hip-hop conflicts and industry power dynamics, continue following Streetwears as this story develops. Because in this industry, what happens behind contracts often matters more than what happens on stage.